The road to growth, success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, you Road to Growth listeners. Today I got Stuart Lichtman. He is an entrepreneur, consultant, trainer, author, coach, and probably a lot more than I'm not even saying. Thank you, Stuart, for being here today.
My pleasure. How you doing today, Vinny?
Good. So with so many hats that you wear, I mean, when people ask you, what do you do, Stuart? What do you do for a living? How do you describe yourself?
I teach people to do seemingly impossible.
Well, it looks like we lost Stuart. Oh, there he is right there. All right. You're back, Stuart. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. The fun of internet. All right. So you were saying?
Oh, I teach people to do impossible things by consciously managing their unconscious mind.
Okay.
Pretty close to 100% success rate.
Wow. Well, I mean, walk us through. I mean, who was a young Stuart growing up? Was he into mindset?
Now, a young Stuart growing up had Asperger's syndrome and couldn't connect with anyone at all.
Oh.
It was a very lonely existence, and I thought I was probably the world's dumbest person.
What happened? What happened?
Well, I struggled along. I got into MIT. I made my way through it somehow. And then I tried to emulate my father's hero, a guy named Jerry Woolman, who built the John Hancock building in Chicago, owned the Philadelphia Eagles, and so on. I went into real estate, and I went into big. I had 4 projects spread out over 50 miles. One of them and a planned city that's now Gaithersburg, Maryland. And well, how can I say it? I was dumb, didn't have the personality for it, didn't have the knowledge. I knew nothing about cycles of real estate. It crashed. I went bankrupt. Wow. Nothing like seeing your family thrown out their house. And I was pretty depressed. I committed suicide, which wasn't really that. I was trying to get back to God. And I, in fact, met God, got reinvigorated, came back. And a year and a half later, I made one phone call and got $200 million starting a venture.
Let's rewind a little bit. You said you felt that you were dumb, I guess in your words, and you had 4 projects going, real estate projects going at the time. How were you getting the investing? How were you even putting the projects together if you didn't have the capacity at that time?
By trick and I had an attorney who said, "Oh, I'll just hold your deposit checks on these properties in my top drawer," which is absolutely illegal, but I didn't know that. And so I was buying property, and then I was leveraging that to get construction loans and so forth. It was a house of cards.
And when the cards fall, you basically said you got evicted, lost everything at that time?
Yep. The hardest part was telling my investors, sorry, I mean, your money's gone.
When you commit suicide, What happened there, and what route did you go?
My father's a doctor, and he'd given me a lot of pills, and so I just chugged them all. And I was at a gas station on the way to one of my projects, and I chugged them. I drove unconsciously there. They found me there. They lifted me in a helicopter to Baltimore, and I woke up in the ICU after having experience with God. Basically, the other side is really nice. If there's a hell, it's here. And I decided to come back to do what I'd agreed to do this lifetime. I came back and I was just really changed inside on the inner level. I was much more connected with myself. The Asperger's syndrome had largely disappeared. I could connect with people. I was psychically adept. And it was 6 months later that I generated the $2.5 million and started a company called Recognition Terminals that eventually sold the company that had invested in it. It was an artificial intelligence venture. And what else can I tell you, Vinny?
Yeah, so I mean, okay, you lost a lot of your investors' money in the real estate aspect of it. Then you look to kill yourself. How long after you come back, do you make? You say you make one phone call to get another investment. How long from that time frame are we kind of looking?
Well, I came out of the hospital and I realized I had to do something to earn money because I had a family. So I turned in a resume to an agent, and through a series of misinterpretations, they hired me. I later found out about the misinterpretations, but turned out to be really good. It was a guy who had the most patents at the time, most useful patents in the world. Learned a lot from him, Jack Rabinow, and he was making artificial intelligence things, reading machines. You remember the old airline tickets that had the red on the back?
Yeah, and you swipe them.
Well, this machine could read them. See, the airlines couldn't take the tickets into revenue until they had proved they had been used. So this machine read the characters, convert them into computer code at the rate of thousands a minute. And that was Jack's project. Jack Rabinow, the inventor. He had just sold his company to Control Data, and I came in shortly after that, which was about a year after the suicide attempt. And I looked around. Here are these machines that cost anywhere from $300,000 to $5 million. I said there has to be a cheaper way of doing it. I invented it, put together a team, and from within the company, and sat down, and name popped into my mind. I called him on a Saturday. He was running a public company, and got through. Talked to him 15 minutes. He said, "Stay there for an hour. I'll have my executive VP call you." Got the call, and 3 days later, I had the money.
Now, when you first got in, and I know I'm kind of going back. I'm just trying to get the full picture for our people listening. is for the real estate venture, the person that kind of gave you the guidance was an attorney. Later on,
No, he didn't really need the guidance. He just gave me a
an avenue.
mechanism.
Okay.
Nobody gave me guidance.
Okay.
It was
So
all by seat of my pants.
you still had someone in your corner, right? That gave you a mechanism to get the properties. And then for the investment avenue, you find another, I guess, well-known individual that's already kind of put together a variety of different patterns. So it sounds like even though you said that you're dumb at that time, you're still putting yourself around people that would allow you the avenue to expand and grow. Was that conscious or was it unconscious?
Well, it was really unconscious. I couldn't relate to people very well.
Okay.
And I just had a series of, quotes, lucky events of meeting people who would invest because the projects were, on the face of them, good.
Hmm.
They weren't investing in me, they were investing in the project.
And then you sell that company and it sounds like a probably pretty good exit now.
No, that company went belly up when I went bankrupt. Went
Oh,
belly up. I
okay.
went bankrupt and I was done with real estate. So I got a job working in artificial intelligence for control data with a guy named Jack Rabinow.
Okay.
I learned to program computers in machine language. I programmed a machine there, and I got friendly with the brainy guys there. And I said, hey, we ought to be able to come up with a cheaper version of this, cost 10%. And in fact, we did.
Then what
And
happens next after that?
next, I'm sitting there saying, I need $2.5 million to do this venture.
Hmm.
So one Saturday, I sat down, I turned down the lights, got in a comfortable chair, and I looked in my mind's eye for who would give me the $2.5 million.
Hmm.
Now, when I was at MIT, I met venture capitalists. In fact, when I was at MIT was when the very first venture capitalists in the world were formed. And I
Hmm.
met them. And one of them told me very wisely, the most important thing a venture capitalist gives its investees is not money, it's contacts.
Hmm.
And so I was always on my toes looking for contacts. So it goes real estate, failure, got a job working in Jack Ravenel, spun out a venture firm, Control Data, $2.5 million in 3 days. A year and a half later, the investor company bought my team out, and I was on to other things.
What were those other things?
Well, I was sitting around in my basement where I had an office at home, and I said, what am I going to do? And I said, I'm going to meet somebody who's giving me an offer. That evening, we had some of my wife's friends over for dinner. And one of them said, just got a big basic ordering contract from the government to provide consulting to minorities in building companies.
Hmm.
And he said, you want a job? I said, how much you pay me? $250 a day. I said, sure, it sounds interesting. So I started doing that. And I think the first project was in South Bronx, Fort Apache. And we took companies that were successful, but their founders were retiring. And because of the nature of the area, none of their kids want to take over the companies. So we bought the companies from them, and I converted drug dealers into mainstream entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
And we did very well. It's a little scary going up, the only white guy in a subway train of what looked to me like fierce people. And but I just surrounded myself with a ball of white light, and nobody bothered me. Did that for a while, and quite successful. I was very pleased being able to take people that other people thought were the throwaways of the world, like I built a company in Roanoke, Virginia, with never employed welfare mothers. And after its first year, it got 3 awards for the best supplier for major corporations. I enjoyed helping people who had some version of my experience in not being able to relate to the world and teaching them how.
Hmm.
And I went from there. Well, this is a little spooky. When I had my near-death experience, I met God. It's a classic near-death experience. Given a choice coming back or not, and I had a big job to do, so I came back. I met a spiritual teacher who had been present in that near-death experience and glommed onto him, started meditating 2 hours a day. After about 4 or 5 years, I was in my home in San Francisco and meditating, and I got big packets of stuff with the instruction, write this down. So you remember those legal pads about that thick, thin lined? I filled up in 5 days 3 of those.
Hmm.
And that was the basis of my cybernetic transposition process of teaching people to consciously manage their unconscious mind to do seemingly impossible things. Being an entrepreneur, I got this stuff in a spooky fashion, and a month later I had a training with 250 people. And of those 250 people, each selected a an objective they thought was impossible, and 67% of them achieved them. Not great, but 67% first try isn't that bad. I started doing that with groups, and then one of my friends in England said, I just went to the House of Commons and heard Margaret Thatcher talking about turning around the British economy. And I said, I know how to do that. So I wrote her a 1.5 page letter. And 2 weeks later, I had a contract to turn around the biggest company in England at the time, British Leyland. They used to make Jaguars and Rover and so on. And using these techniques, I kept getting more and more sophisticated techniques from Spirit. And the Leninist labor unions, that was during the Cold War, were trying to destroy the British economy by tubing this company through Leninist. I don't know whether you know about Lenin as opposed to Stalin. Stalin was a pussycat compared to Lenin.
Hmm.
And Lenin, Lenin knew you were on a list, had 10 categories. If you were in category 9 or 10, immediately you were assassinated. That kind of a list. Okay, so in 6 months, using my techniques, the British Leyland had caused the rank and file to eject the Leninist labor union leaders and put one into work. Problem solved. British Leyland was on its way to getting back on its feet. I then went from that to projects around the world. Bootstrapping all the time. I would set an unconscious objective to meet people on my airplane flights. And I'd sit next to a guy and you get into these conversations, you know, what do you do? What do you do? They'd ask me, I'd say, I help people achieve seemingly impossible things. What seems impossible in your company? So I'd be sitting next to chairman and vice chairman, presidents and so on. And very often I'd leave the airplane with a contract for $500,000 to $2 million. My prior clients were very nice, acting as reference for me, and the results produced more people. So pretty soon I was up from $250 a day to 25,000 and 50,000 a day.
So the way you were growing your consulting business was strictly from, or mostly from flights, taking flights from one location to the next.
Now, I eventually ended up flying around the world once a month, which is no picnic. And since my clients are paying for me to be in first, I was sitting with CEOs and people like that. It was kind of funny. I'd set up unconsciously for a client to show up next to me, and I'd see somebody moving from this seat to that seat to that seat and sitting down next to me. I knew I had a pigeon. And it's all very easy. And that's what I teach. I say easy is good when what you consciously want is aligned with what your unconscious is preparing to do. It's easy. And so that, what can I say?
How do you think your younger self, the one that was into real estate development, would have taken your teachings at that time?
Oh, it would have been really helpful. What was happening was I was unconsciously using part of it. After the near-death experience, I came back different. I was different. I was connected to God. I was connected to my unconscious. I could connect with people. It was like during the near-death experience, somebody took a big switch and went black and turned on my abilities. And suddenly I was able to use what I knew, and I would invent on the spot. A client would say, well, or a potential client would say, well, you know, we're having real trouble with sales. And so on the spot, I came up with the basics of a technique that eventually allowed companies to multiply their sales by 3 to 8 times in a year. You multiply a company's sales 3 to 8 times a year, they think paying $25,000, $50,000 a day is a real bargain. And I also said to them, if they're skeptical about paying me that, I said to them, hey, I'll do it for 20% of the added marginal contribution. Marginal contribution is the cost of sales deducted from selling price. So it had not, it was just the raw income. And a few of them actually took me up on that. I gave them a month to kick out and go to the fixed price. But the ones who did end up paying me about $150,000 a day because the results were so great. I took a division of Ericsson that they're about to put out of business. Ericsson's the largest manufacturer of telephone switches that connect the caller with the callee by telephone. And they're the largest in the world. They had a division they were about to tube because it just was unprofitable. Turned it around in 3 months. That was my business. Then I had another one of my things. One day I'm in London, getting ready to go to Stockholm. I come down to check out and I must faint. It felt like I had food poisoning. But being me, I didn't go to a doctor. I just pushed on, got on the flight. By the time we got to Stockholm, I couldn't get off the plane. They had to wheel me off. Doctor said to me, oh, you have the Sri Lankan curse. I said, what's that? They said, it's something new. You're the 6th case. And we don't know what it is. We don't know how to heal it. But it is pretty nasty. I made it back to the US. And for the next 18 months, I was told by doctors, we don't know what it is, but you're dying. I couldn't even walk 10 feet by myself. And some friends in my spiritual group, one day I was living in Santa Barbara, came and said, hey, there's a Filipino psychic surgeon in town. I said, that's bullshit. And they said, you're going. I said, no. I was so weak, they just picked me up by my elbows, put me in the car, took me. And I met this very pleasant gentleman. He was staying in somebody's house. He quoted some verses from the Bible, which is not my stuff. And he said, let's go in the kitchen. We went in the kitchen. There was a pot of oil boiling on the stove. He sticks his hand into it, blows on it, tells me to take off my shirt, rubs the oil on my chest. And what I literally saw was he put his hand in through my chest wall into my innards, meaning it appeared, his hand just disappeared into my body. He pulls it out and takes a metal bowl, throws something into it, splat. He did that a few times. He said, come back tomorrow. I did that for 3 days. I was healed completely, 100%. I have no idea how he did it, but I have had times in my life when logic would say this is crazy, and I went ahead anyway, like this one. And if you get a gift from God, take it. And this is a gift from God. So I was back full steam. But I decided not to do this around the world traveling anymore. It's really wears your body down. I did it for 10 years, around the world once a month. And so I decided I'd write a book about what I'd been teaching. And I incidentally, quotes, ran into people like Joe Vitale and other people who had large lists. And They agreed to promote the book for a good share of the profits. And suddenly I had sold 30, 40, 50,000 copies at 97 bucks a piece. And then some of these people said, hey, why don't you do a training and teach you the stuff? So in a month, I put together a training and called the Super Achiever Coaching Program. And out of the box, people were getting 80% first try success rate doing seemingly impossible. I kept doing that. After 10 years, it was 100%. And it's held there since then.
The being that you've had some experiences where you've talked about the idea that, I mean, people would say impossible. Some people, are listening and they probably don't believe it, where you have the near death and you were dead for a couple of moments, where you had that physician basically pulling something out of your chest, being that see in your eyes basically impossible things. How do you keep an open mind now when someone brings up an idea to you that might seem impossible to you today, when you're talking to them? Or how do you react when someone propositions you with an idea that just seems very outlandish?
Well, I don't really work that way. See, what I was given, excuse me, I keep getting these reminders. What I was given by Spirit, I call it cybernetic transposition, really consists of three major steps. And if you do the three major steps, you can do almost literally anything. Never tried levitating, and the odds of winning the lottery are too great, like 280, 300 million to 1. But if we talk about normal, seemingly impossible things, like getting 600,000 bucks out of the blue, there are three steps. Number one is coming up with a target that is appropriate for your conscious and unconscious mind. That means consciously it makes sense. Yeah, this is right, this is what I want. And unconsciously, it just feels right. It feels natural, right? This is the path for me. That's the first step. Second step, because the unconscious, which does all the doing, is constantly doing millions of things, keeping your body working, among others, you have to get what you want, your objective, prioritized. So it gets to the top of the stack. So I have a system for that. The third thing is that you have to clear out of the way the unconscious roadblocks that would stop you. I call them blockers. They're self-defeating unconscious habit patterns. Let me give you an example that most people have had. You get a book, you think it really has value, you start reading it, and you fall asleep. That's a self-defeating unconscious habit pattern. Falling asleep when you want to be reading the book. Or you are going to have an opportunity to address a whole lot of people, and you get up there on the stage and you just blow it. That's another self-defeating unconscious habit pattern. So I have techniques to rapidly, permanently change these self-defeating unconscious habit patterns into success patterns. So let's say every time you meet a girl that you're really attracted to, you become tongue-tied and you blow it. You can go into your unconscious and you can change the way you unconsciously really react to the stimulus of meeting a girl you really like into very suavely and effectively and humorously interacted with her to make a great impression. And it takes about half an hour to do that. And henceforth, every time you meet a girl that you're attracted to, you will perform in the way I just described. You make a good impression, you communicate, and so on. Does that make sense?
No, definitely. I mean, you're rewiring. I mean, your brain on a unconscious level. I fully understand. Thank you so much, Stuart, for being here today on the Road to Growth podcast. If someone's listening, and those ideas relate to them because they feel their unconscious stopping them kind of expand and grow. What's the best way of them getting more information about your books, about your classes? What's the best way?
Well, my book, they can go to www.anything-fast.com, and I talk all about the book and there's a video and so on. If they want to go deeper and get into my coaching program, I call it the 100% success rate coaching program. Oh my gosh, I just forgot the URL. Let her come back in a minute. If they want to go the direction of becoming a super entrepreneur, I have a program for that, which is super-entrepreneur.net. And I have the other URL, but if they go to my homepage, stuartlichtman.com, StuartLichtman.com, they'll find a lot of wisdom, they'll find some free ebooks, and they'll find links to my other programs.
Well, thank you, Stuart, so much for being on the podcast. If you go in the show notes, you'll find all of Stuart's information. I mean, I think there's probably, a lot of key takeaways from this. I mean, the tenacity that you fail once, get back up and kind of do it again, be around the right people, and have that mindset to know what you want and know where you want to be. Even the simplest idea, and I know you're going to get a deeper dive when you go to get Stuart's book and kind of work with your unconscious mind, but the simple idea of being okay to talk about what you're willing to offer. I mean, I know in the real estate field, there's a lot of people that are really smart in the real estate field, yet they're always afraid to actually have the conversation about what they do and who they are. So just being okay with who you are and be confident in who you are. Thank you, Stuart, for being here. Everyone, please go in the show notes, go find Stuart, and please subscribe to the podcast. Bye, everyone. Have a great one.